as the stars came in, grown men and women were just screaming, screeching. Some people were in tears as these people were coming in.
And they wanted me to join a gang. And this is when New York City didn't really have real gangs. And they were called the Playboy Nomads. And I was like, y'all not going nowhere.
That's courtesy, New York courtesy. Really, honestly, I was like, oh, that was nice.
And that's a phenomenon called time dilation. And if anybody's ever had a man explain the movie Interstellar to them, it also works the other way around.
It's FAQ NYC Presents, where the only podcast in the only city in the world breaks into its usual programming to bring you new, different limited series. I'm Alex Brooklyn, the pod's founding executive producer, here with Harry Siegel for the second of 3 episodes of Thirst, featuring yarns about a New York minute from a storytelling event we hosted earlier this year.
In this episode, you'll be hearing first from 2 native New Yorkers, Queens and FAQ's own Katie Honan, and then the comedian and Bronx native David Ray Martinez. They're followed by 2 transplants, J.T. Price, a fiction writer and editor of the Brazen Head Review, and, finally, a story about Alex from her better half, Adam Levy. Let's jump right in with Katie after this programming note. All right, listeners, we need your help. FAQ NYC depends on you. We're part of a nonprofit newsroom called The City, which means we rely on donations. And it's getting toward the end of the year, which means the clock is ticking. We need to raise as much as we can before January 1st in order to start 2024 off strong. So please, if you've enjoyed listening this year, make a contribution now at thecity.nyc/give. That's thecity.nyc/give. I'm going to keep going while you pull out your phone and enter that URL, which, again, is thecity.nyc/give.
thecity.nyc/give.
Great. A donation of any amount will help us because we're a small nonprofit, so every dollar goes a long way. Chip in what you can. You guessed it. thecity.nyc/give. That's right. It's thecity.nyc/give. Thank you, truly. And now to the stories. Katie Honan is Queens, is New York City, the whole thing, is a reporter, a citizen, a pretty fabulous person, a valued member of The City, the newsroom, and The City, the place, and she's got a story to tell. Hey, Katie.
I'm not as tall.
Let me help you out with this.
Perfect. So I know Alex talked about crime and craziness and all that stuff, but I just, and Harry's intro of me, before I was any of those things, I was just a little girl in Queens who found herself to be really obsessed with the ABC soap opera All My Children, which filmed here in New York City, so it is relevant. I don't know if it's a New York Minute, but this is a little bit of a story about self-realization. So I started watching the show when I was like 8 years old. And a lot of people get into these soaps because their mom or their grandma watched. But for me, I just got into it randomly, which always really perplexed my mom. She was like, why is she so into this show? But it really consumed my life at 8 years old. I started watching in the summer. So then, of course, I had to watch when school started. I convinced my dad to tape it for me on the VCR. And then, of course, when I would get in trouble, they would say, we're not going to tape All My Children this week. And I would cry and cry until I realized I could just learn how to tape it myself by reading the VCR manual, which I did. I subscribed to Soap Opera Digest. I got my mom to do all this stuff for me. I actually joined the fan club, which consisted of a woman in New Jersey 4 times a year mailing, I don't know how many people were in the fan club, mailing a little manila envelope of photos from events they did at Blondie's bar up on the Upper West Side. I asked my mom at 10 years old if we can go to Blondie's. She said no. All of this stuff, it really became like an obsession for me. The characters, the people, the storylines, once we got the internet, I would run online to forums. You can get spoilers and all this kind of stuff. And obviously the peak of this was the Super Soap weekend, which was in Disney World. I asked my parents if we can go. They said absolutely not. But the second best thing was to go to the All My Children Fan Fest, which was held every year at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square. And my mom one day surprised me at the end of the school year. I just graduated the 8th grade. It was Labor Day weekend of this coming summer, right? So I was about to go into high school, and she surprised me with 2 tickets to this All My Children Fan Fest. And I was completely ecstatic. I was convinced that going to this would change my life. I would meet people. I would meet the stars. Maybe my dream was to be a writer for the soaps. I thought maybe they'd meet me and they'd want me to be a writer. Maybe I'd figure it out. I made my mom take me to Kings Plaza Mall to get an outfit for it. I was so excited. The day happens. My dad drives us in. He drops us off. We go up this glass elevator of the Marriott Marquis, and I'm so excited because I was truly convinced that this was going to be such a defining moment of my life, of meeting Haley and Mateo, Erica Kane, Brooke English, whoever I was going to meet. I knew this was going to change my life. We get to the big room, and we're seated, and I'm slowly realizing that everyone in that room was the absolute biggest fucking weirdo I'd ever seen in my life. As the stars came in, grown men and women were just screaming, screeching. Some people were in tears as these people were coming in. One guy at our table had what looked like a voodoo doll of Mateo, who's Mark Consuelos' character. Some guy had a scrapbook that I later realized looked like a manifesto for a mass shooter. It was just the biggest weirdos I'd ever met in my entire life. And of course, I mentioned this earlier. My mom was always a little uncomfortable about how much I was into the show because she didn't get it, and she was suffering through it. The food was horrible. We had to wait online to meet everybody. And at one point towards the end, I remember going to the bathroom. It was my first time at the hotel, and I went to the bathroom and I was washing my hands, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm thinking, I started high school in a couple days. And as I washed my hands, I'm like, you're here too. So, what does that make you in this grand theme of this is if the guy next to you talking about these people like he was friends with them is weird, you're also weird. So we finished it out. We had bad, dry desserts, and we all got our pictures with our stars and everything. And I just remember going down the elevator with my mom, this beautiful glass elevator, and I said, Mom, can you never tell anybody ever that we did this? And without hesitation, she said, sure. And I really never told anybody for years that I did this. I kept watching the show. I will say I kept watching the show. And in some ways, Brooke English, who was a reporter in Pine Valley, Pennsylvania, inspired me to become the muckraking journalist that I like to think that I am. Although Brooke did go to jail to protect a source, I haven't yet. But that was me, and that was my New York story. It occurred to me today that I should probably finally admit to a room full of people that at 13, my mom spent money to be around a lot of freaks that for many years I was one of. So that is my New York Minute. Thank you.
Next up, we have David Ray Martinez, who is another person that I met at Brazen Head, the secret bookstore. He's an incredible comedian. He's a really funny guy. And honestly, he's kind of like a hype man for life. He's a person that you hang out with and they make the world at large more fun. So for our New York Minute theme, and I'm really, really happy that he could make it. I don't know if you guys know this, but Harry and I kind of threw this together last minute because I was about to. Oh, no. I mean, it took a lot of arduous planning. But I'm really glad he could make it. David Ray Martinez.
Oh, yeah. How y'all doing? Oh, New York Minute. So many minutes, especially when you're born here. Where do I start? It's a weird thing when you guys say New York Minute because my mother and father are from Panama, which means I'm from the Bronx. And it's weird growing up, especially back then in the 70s and 80s and 90s in the Bronx, because my mother and father were immigrants, and my mother's super Catholic. So all those things together just make a very paranoid household. And so since my mother and dad were immigrants and didn't have their papers, uh, when people would knock on the door, my mother would be like, shh, turn off the TV, everything. I'm like, Ma, they would have already heard the TV and the washing machine going. Like, they know someone's home. But she would be like, don't answer the door, right? And very paranoid about everything. And it was just a weird, like I said, it was a weird time for me growing up as a little kid, worrying about, is someone gonna take your mother away? Because she would always, she'd be like, don't talk to strangers because it could be somebody who knows somebody who's gonna take your mommy away. Do you want that? Do you want that? Do you want them to take your mommy? I don't care if they take your daddy, but but I don't want them to take me, okay? And I'd be like, got it. I don't want them to take you away either. And she was always reiterate that. And my mother she's still with us, is an amazing cook. When I say she could cook, she can cook. Like, people go, what's the best meal you've ever had? And I'm like, my mama. No restaurant in the city has touched it yet, and I eat a lot of places. And my mother worked in a lot of Catholic places, Catholic churches, Morningside, 125th and Morningside. And at that place, they had a shelter also, and my mother would literally make me hand out like apple pies, the little apple pies, and be like, don't eat it. I'm like, Ma, come on. How do you want me to stay like a plus size man, right? Like, she would give me these beautiful apple pies and be like, give it to the people who need it. I'm like, they don't need diabetes, Mom. And she would literally have me, give the people in the shelter apple pies and toothbrush, toothpaste, and things like that. And she would make me work in the community constantly. And during that time, back in the early 90s, it was real rough out here. Your friends, moms, and people were on crack and stuff. I mean, the first time I discovered drugs, I've never done drugs, but I've discovered drugs because me and my friend Anthony Stuyvesant, we were playing on his mother's table with G.I. Joes. I was Storm Shadow, his was Snake Eyes. And we didn't know we were playing inside aluminum foil, and there was a bunch of white powder. And we were just like, yeah, G.I. Joe, American hero, hero. And his mother came in and said, what the fuck y'all doing in my shit? And we was just like, we playing G.I. Joes, we're having fun, we're playing G.I. Joes. She's like, And then when I told my mother, she's like, you never going over there again. Why? She give you coffee? I was like, nah, I don't think that was coffee. But my mother, she, like I said, she was a great cook, or is a great cook. She cooked for like Cardinal O'Connor, like any super Catholic person who would come into town, they would ask for my mother's food. And, she still like, in her head, she's still like, she's 82. She's like, I should sell cupcakes. Like, that's her big thing. If Starbucks can sell it for $4, I can sell it for $3. And I'm like, okay, Ma, I'm like, whatever you want to do, I'm behind you. But she was always a champion for me. Like, I got into a really, quote unquote, funny, not funny school, but, whatever, PS 31 in the Bronx. It was the castle in the Bronx. Huge castle on 144th Street in the Grand Concourse where all the special kids from the Bronx would go. And she was so proud of me. She was so happy that I went there. But she did let my brother pick out my clothes, and it was really bad. Because New York City kids are the most beautiful, abusive people. So since it's a smart school, and this is like 86, 87, and this is like Miami Vice time, so my brother bought me Puma sneakers and Lee jeans that are not in style anymore. And these kids are all in their Jordans and Nikes and sweatsuits and tracksuits. And I come into class, and I remember this one kid, he was like, shout, shout. Lisa played out. And then like his homegirl was like, Lisa played out. These are the jeans you can do without. Come on, David. We're talking to you. Come on. And in my mind, the teacher came in and said, do-doom, do-doom. But I know that didn't happen, but in my head, I feel like that's how it should have happened. And in this same school, we went to the next school, which was JHS 149, Clarkson in the Bronx also. And they wanted me to join a gang. And this is when New York City didn't really have real gangs. And they were called the Playboy Nomads. And I was like, y'all not going nowhere. And you're not Playboys. And these kids, 3 kids, fought me in the bathroom. And I wound up beating them up. And after beating them up, they called my mother. And my mother said, my son don't touch nobody first, okay? Did he touch them first? And they're like, we have 3 kids. One has a broken nose, one has a black eye, and the other one's stomach hurts. And she's like, well, I don't care. Did they touch him first? It sounds like 3 versus 1. How can he beat up 3 people? And they were like, well, man, can you? And she's like, I'm not coming in there because I'm working. Send my son home. And I was just like, I didn't touch him. I was like, I didn't touch them first. They touched me in the bathroom. Like one kid peed on my sneaker. And, you know, they were already played out sneakers. So I had a fight, right? But basically, you know, and now I have a 16-year-old son, and it's weird because he's very like nonchalant about everything. And I'm just like, geez, like New York, I don't know, my personal opinion, has gotten very delicate, dainty. I would say petite. It's just it's very soft. My son told me he doesn't drink tap water. And I'm a single dad, and I'm like, I did that. All right. He's like, I don't drink tap water. I'm like, that's what made me, man. That's what. And I mean, I love this city so much. I live in Harlem. I'm trying to rebrand it as the Harlems. I'm gonna talk to you because we need a rebrand. I need my property to go up. Oh, welcome to the Harlems, you know? Doesn't that sound good? You want to take the jitney to the Harlems? I mean, I don't know. This city has too many stories. I guess one last story. I've met a lot of famous people. I used to work at the Waldorf Astoria for 20 years, and I worked at the Mark Hotel for a couple of years. And at the Mark Hotel, you know, I fuck people's names. I don't give a fuck who you is. That's how I was raised. Everyone takes a dump. That's how my brother taught me. Everyone takes a dump. You treat everybody well. Everybody's a cool person. So I'm in an elevator with this guy, definitely has like Secret Service, and if you've ever been in the Mark, the elevators are very tiny. Like literally, if they're too short, I'm rubbing my titties in their face. Like it's a small elevator. So I'm in an elevator with the Secret Service and this old white gentleman. And I go, damn, brother, you looking sharp. You better go kill them ladies out there, brother. You know? And he laughs. He's like, thank you very much, sir. And then like, I'm in the lobby and everybody, and I was like, yo, have a great day. And I pat him on the back, and Secret Service is like, whatever. They know I don't give a fuck. So they go on about the day, and they're like, David, you know who you patting on the back? I'm like, nah, some old white dude. I call everybody brother. He's like, you know that's Prince Philip, right? I'm like, Prince Philip who? Because we had princesses and princes and sheiks. I've drank with the Sheik of Qatar. Like, people love me. So I just was like, ain't he a brother? He's going to tell somebody later that a black guy called him a brother. He's going to feel good about that. So, one last thing. Sharon Stone, I got her glasses fixed. So I took it upstairs. So I was like, damn, girl, we some blind bitches. And she was like, You right. And when she came downstairs, I said, we should call ourselves BB, for blind bitches. And we both laughed. And she comes downstairs in the middle of like Fashion Week, a bunch of people downstairs taking pictures. She goes, bye, BB. And everybody's like, what? Why she call you BB for? And I'm like, mind your business. Anyway, thank you so much for letting me talk about random shit. Give it up for Alex and Harry. Alex and Harry.
So the next storyteller is a really good friend of mine. Again, Brazenhead alumni. JT Price is a fiction writer and an editor and is actually one of the forces behind the Brazenhead Review, which is a small magazine. They're going to have a party next week. Welcome, JT.
Thanks, Alex and Harry and all y'all for being here. And Brazenhead Review next Saturday, Black Spring Books, 8 p.m. I'm sure you'll all be there. But yeah, come on out. This is a story about New York courtesy, I guess. I met New York 3 or 4 minutes of my life. But because I'm a fiction writer, I'm going to include a prologue and epilogue brief. So this is about a year ago, and my birthday is, I'm a Leo, so late August. On the night of my birthday, I'd been going out a lot last year, like maybe 3-4 nights a week, sometimes longer, sometimes more, up, pretty late. And thank you. And so I kind of accustomed to talking to people at all hours, very kind of inured to it. On my birthday, I was at a bar on Smith Street, and there was a huge wedding party there. I was with a bunch of writers. It's probably 3 a.m, 4 a.m. Before 4, I guess 4 is when it closed. And at some point, the wedding party clears out. It's just us. It's like, 12 people left. And I noticed there's a $100 bill on the floor. And I was like, oh. And I picked it up, and there was a very brief moment. I was like, should give it to the bar. That'd be nice. So this was my birthday. It's my birthday. So pocketed it. And then over the course of like I had this $100 bill in my wallet and not much else, maybe, I don't know, $20 or something. And over the next week, I was like, I showed a few friends, like, hey, $100 bill in my, and this is unusual for me, obviously. That's why I was calling attention to it. But anyway, so I was leaving from the Midwest. I went to Minnesota every summer with family, northern Minnesota, a cabin on a lake. And my parents were there. I was going to drive. I have a 2006 Honda Civic, which will be a key character in the story. It's a beater. It's a car I bought for my sister about 10 years ago. It has dents that she put in it, dents I put in it. It's not a pretty thing, but it works and it gets you places. And because it's a long drive to Minnesota, it's like 20 hours plus. I was going to leave at 3:30 in the morning. I live in the middle of Park Slope. I've been out very late many nights in the time leading up to this, so I'm just totally accustomed to, all right, it's 3 a.m, go for a drive, I'm very awake. And I did, I got very caffeinated. I drank a bunch of caffeine, got coffee. I'm walking out to my car. I'm still kind of doing some packing. And I noticed on the corner, there were 3 kids. Again, middle of Park Slope. I'm not thinking much about it. I just basically like humming to myself, like I'm in my own little musical. Anyways, one of them, very short, like a kid, definitely like just a kid. Like make eye contact with him. This is like a child. But he approaches, and as I see him approach, it's kind of clocking. So I'm like arranging things in the back seat, not really paying attention, which is, I think kind of why this happened. And I'd been out there for a couple minutes, so it wasn't right away. And kid's walking up, and I notice, whoa, okay. He's kind of moving side to side. He's wearing a mask over his mouth, and his hoodie's pulled down, which again, I don't really take that to mean anything, especially in the context of the pandemic, which we were still in. But something's happening. And I lift my head, and my initial thought was kind of Mr. Roger. I was like, well, hey, how can I help? And he just keeps getting closer and closer, not saying anything. And I was like, oh, like you're mugging me, huh? And he had these two friends who were much bigger. I barely like see them, and they circle around very fast behind me. And so at the moment that they're behind me, like there's two huge, bigger kids behind me and this one kid in front of me. That's the moment where like you're caught. Like there's no, you think about the action movies, like Jason Bourne does like 5 different moves. It's like no, you can't see behind you, so it's just not a good idea. But anyways, so I'm like in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm about to go for this drive. I'm halfway from this drive. I'm driving 20 hours. Okay, I'll give them my wallet and I'll figure out, I'll do something. And they're like keys. And I was like, oh shit! Like car is packed, like full, like a kid going home from college. Like all the clothes I've been wearing for the last like 3 weeks are in a laundry bag in the trunk, along with every laptop I own, and plus all this other crap, just like books and whatnot. I was planning to go to there for 2 weeks or whatever. Car is packed full of stuff, and so I'm just like, and I'm like also like, hey, it's a 2006 Honda Civic. What would you want this for? But anyways, after it was about 8 seconds where I was like, I really don't. And then I was like, okay, hand over the keys. And at that point, I kind of just like lowered my head and like lifted. I was like, look, guys, take whatever you want. Like I'm not gonna look at you. I don't want to, just whatever. And they get the wallet, the $100 bill. They were really happy about it. They're like, oh, and then they're also like, get the fuck away. So I cross the street. And they get in my car, they turn the car on, and like they're noticing too that like, oh my God, it's like packed full of crap. And I can like hear them like kind of talking about it. And I'm just like, all right, we'll have to try some. I'm going to try to get my laptops out of the back. I have to, it was my fucking laptop. It's like they're worth more in the car, honestly. And so I was like, hey, guys, the trunk's full of my clothes. Can I get my clothes out of the trunk? And there's like a talking, and then like it's like 30 seconds, and then like he's like, yo, trunk's open. So I'm like, all right, in business. So I go across the street. I also have this really evil thought as I open the trunk. I'm like, what if I just had like a weapon in here, like Charles Brown? Like I could just be a really evil. Like the thought just crosses my mind. Like I'm a fiction writer, so I'm always like thinking of absurd scenarios. I think the kids must have had like the same thought in a way, because one of them jumps out. He's like, what's that? I'm like, oh, it's and there was the satchel with my laptops, first thing I grabbed, and then there was this huge bag of laundry, which I put over it, but like not in a very it wasn't really concealed. And they were like high school age kids. I don't think that they didn't want violence, and so I think it was just more checking like you're not up to anything. And so I get my stuff, I take it across the street. I'm at that moment very proud of myself. I'm like, yeah, save the laptops. Damn, I'm real good. And the kid who checked on me starts just throwing everything out of the trunk. And it's not just stuff for the drive. It's stuff that's been in there for like 5 years. It's like a duffel bag of old clothes, like a bumper guard, he's just throwing it all out. And like minutes are going by, and like it's this Park Slope street. It's not a big street. There are people everywhere. They're all sleeping. Yeah, it's 3 a.m. But like, again, like a car alarm goes off, or even if one car drives down the street and stops and they're blocked in, like that's a whole thing, right? So his friends start yelling at him, and he looks at me. I'm like, yeah, man, like you should go. And so he gets in the car, and I have this final thought, which is like, okay, well, I still want to make this drive, and I don't know, I'm like already spinning into the future, like I don't know, insurance, like rental car or something, and I'm like, but the thing that kind of fuels these long drives for me, maybe you all can relate, is music, and I had this iPod Classic with like 7,000 songs on it. It's in the center console. I'm like, I need this thing, or I need to at least try. Like I got my laptops. So they're literally pulling out, and I'm like, hey, it's a really old. I'm trying to like just really emphasize the word old, and like that's the gross, like the old iPod, like it's so old, and the center console is can I get it back? And then they actually started yelling at each other. I could hear like yelling, and so I'm like just kind of hugging my head. I was like, all right, well that's gonna be a big no. And the car like pulls out of the space, and then it stops, and the passenger window goes down like 8 inches, and a hand just reaches out, extending the iPod. And so I like dash across the street, grab it, and I'm like, thank you. And then they like drive off with my fucking Honda Civic. And so that's courtesy, New York courtesy. Really, I mean, honestly, I was like, oh, that was nice. I mean, they threw all my stuff in the street, which actually was. I don't think they meant it this way necessarily, but it was a good strategy because it slowed me from going to call the police. I was like, oh, all my shit's in the street. I gotta get it out of the street first. So 20 minutes before I got up to actually call from a landline. And but the holding the iPod out for me, holding it, then it was throw out there, they just held it there. I was like, oh, okay, there was no reason to do that. That was pretty nice. And but anyway, so they took the car. They tried to. I mean, this is the epilogue. They tried to mug somebody very close by, in Union Street. Didn't go well. They drove away, and then they went to Nassau County and knocked off a 7-Eleven. And I guess clerk there wasn't as agreeable as I was, and I guess they pistol whipped him. I don't know. And then the police arrived, and they led the police on a car chase in my Honda Civic. They crashed the Honda Civic. They all ran for it, and 2 of them were arrested. And I guess the ringleader was this 16-year-old kid. And they're like, and the police are all like, yeah, this gang, they're trying to get me to say that I saw a gun and I was like, I really didn't look at all. I have no idea what they had. I didn't see anything. But anyways, the real epilogue is that these kids had my car for 3 hours, and the police in Nassau County then kept it for 3 months. And they wouldn't they were charging my insurance per day for storage in the lot. And the Brooklyn rental place would send a tow truck out there, and they'd be like, oh yeah, sorry, COVID this week, so no one was at the place. Or it would always be a different excuse. And it happened for over a month. And to the point where the insurance started calling me and acting as if I was in on it or something, and yelling at me. And I was like, I had nothing to do with this. In the end, the insurance then paid me the full amount of the car, declared it a total loss, even though it wasn't. So I ended up making $3,000 on this whole scenario. So that's if you're ever oh, how am I gonna make rent this month? Just get your car taken and no, that's bad advice. All right. Anyways, thanks.
Adam Levy has worked with computers for 15 years, and he has been storytelling with the Salon Thirst since 2019. And since splitting his time in Paris, he's also known to throw a few tales with the show Paris Lit Up, which is a storytelling salon we both go to over there. This is my partner in crime, Adam Levy.
There's a lot of people here. Hi, my name is Adam. Not everybody is going to come mysteriously from back there. Is there I can do this part. Yeah, I know. There's only one of me. Okay. Just completely vaporize all the energy in the room. Hi. Hey, Annie, thanks for hosting. The city, thanks for sponsoring. It's nice to meet everybody. Well, let's see. As she said, I've been working with computers for a long time, so I'm going to take the prompt and be obnoxiously literal with it. So, a New York minute. Why do we call it that? New York. No, most other cities don't have their own expression of time. It's because of that pace, It's because everything happens in New York so fast, and so it's how a minute takes 3 or 4 seconds. Or rather, that things happen and you feel like so much time has passed, but it really hasn't. And that's a phenomenon called time dilation. And if anybody's ever had a man explain the movie Interstellar to them, it also works the other way around. So for this, I have selected 4 moments in my life, 4 minutes that felt like they took hours. The first one is minute number 16 of a total of somewhere around between 20 and 4,000 that I was waiting for an R train at 1 a.m. when I was 17 years old. I had come into the city. I was born in New York City, but I was brought out of the city into Carroll Gardens. By about a year and a half, my parents moved to the suburbs, and there I stayed. My father commuted into the city. And so the city was a place that I went. It wasn't a city that I lived until much later. So whenever I got a chance to go in the city, it was great. It was super exciting. My friend Ali and I went to the city for a show at Irving Plaza, and we took mushrooms, and then the mushrooms wore off, and then we had to wait for a train to get back to Penn Station. We had to wait. We had to hope to get to the last train at Penn Station, and the city was still so huge to me. It was this like foreign place that sort of went for a million miles. And so we climbed underground at Union Square to wait for what must have been an R train. And I felt like that wait was at least 3 hours. I felt like I had fashioned myself out of a jacket, like an entire bed. We consumed all the food that we just picked up at the bodega at us. We'd had 3 full conversations. And by the end of it, I was just like, is this how people live? Do they just like sleep on the ground and wait for their train to show up? And in retrospect, after having lived here for a while, there is no way that wait was longer than 20 minutes. So minute number 16, easy first candidate for one of the longest minutes of my entire life. The second one is a shorter story. The way that I actually moved up to New York was that a person who I'd worked for a while when I worked at the Washington Post had since moved on to work at Bloomberg, the media part, not the smart computer part. You've probably heard of it because somebody has tried to sell it to you for $40 a month and you've politely declined. She hired me to work with her. And so it was my first experience getting headhunted. So I got like moved from DC up to New York. It was super cool. It was cool to move and never have to touch your stuff. Like a pack of locusts swarmed in and just sort of vacuumed me into Flatbush. And so I went up to 3 days after I started at Bloomberg. I was stuck on an elevator with the owner, a guy who used to run New York City. I believe his name is Michael Bloomberg. And Mike Bloomberg and I sat on an elevator, the two of us, for 2 minutes and 45 seconds ish. And at the end of the second minute, he just sort of looked at himself and just goes, balls. And then the elevator door opened and they left. That's him. That's our guy. Every story about him is true. It's one of the only people that's true about. Okay, number 3. Something happens when you meet the person that you are going to ask to marry you, or the person that you're gonna just like, oh, this is different. You meet that person. And what happens when you meet that person is that your relationship with, in my case, I believe this is true, and at least I've verified this through at least 2 other anecdotes. So I'm calling it. What happens is that your parents transform like immediately in front of your eyes. Before that, like anybody who I was introducing them to was like meeting my parents, and how they reacted to my parents was a referendum on them. It was like, how are you going to behave around these people who are just like sort of generally decent and kind, normal people? If you're weird, that is interesting information to learn about you. But when you meet somebody like, when you meet somebody and you're like, oh, I'm probably going to ask this girl to marry me. This seems actually really good. Immediately it flips around. And it's like, these are just 2 boomers that I've got to introduce to the person who I'm going to ask to marry me, and how they act is a referendum on them. And none of the experiences went great, to be honest. Like immediately I was just like, it's you guys. Like I never thought I was going to be the people with the in-laws, but I'm the people with the in-laws. And so one of the things that I know about Alex from the very beginning is that as a native New Yorker, because I left and came back, she's Bane. She was born in the dark. I had to, it's a movie reference. And so one of the things that she never, ever does is wait online for pizza. Like that's just she was like, why would you ever do that? Why would you ever do that? And why would you ever do that? What kind of a rube, what kind of a joke are you? There's pizza right there. If you want pizza, just go eat the pizza. Like they might, like, it's just like a please pickpocket me sign that you're wearing around you. And I was like, well, there's experience pizza, isn't there? Like a fucking rube, like a joke. And so one of the places that I really like to go and wait for pizza, like a joke, is a place that I was like, let's take my parents who have never been here to do this, and we're going to go to Totonno's in Coney Island back when it existed. And we're going to go there and get some pizza. By the time I had gone there, I'd met the lady there. It was awesome. The pizza was great. And so we went and we sat down at a table and we ordered some pizza. And we waited. The minute that I'm referring to is minute number 37 of 52 that we waited. We sat at a table and we did all the small talk, and we did about 10 minutes of medium talk. And Alex let me know that she never waits for pizza. And my parents were wondering when someone was going to bring the food. And my parents continued to wonder when someone was going to bring the food to me, as if I knew, as if I worked there, as if I was a brand ambassador to Totonno's. And minute number 37 was the minute where I was just like, oh, one of the things that I could do is just walk into the ocean. Let's see. Okay. My last story. This is a interrupted drawing of Annie of Walter, so she can have this one afterwards, or at the very least, I'll sign it. That's what he looks like in art form. So I'd always seen it in movies, but I didn't think it would I never thought this would happen to me. I got the call while I was at work that Alex was in labor, and I was in the middle of a meeting, and I got the little text message, and I go, "I'm sorry, guys, I have to leave. My wife is in labor," and everybody goes like, "Yeah, cool, we're rad," and I was like, "Fuck off, guys, see you later," and then it just sort of in the middle of a meeting, walked out of the office. That turned into a sprint, right? Because I had a job to do. You know, this was not something that we expected to happen. My wife was quite surprised to go into labor and have her water break while she was immediately just went down and sat on somebody's couch and was like, something. And then so they're in the car. She is no longer driving, so they're crossing the Williamsburg Bridge. And so my job is to run home and hastily assemble like the hospital bag, because we had just made he was a month and change early, so we had just had the conversation the night before about what goes in the bag. And so I had this freshly made list of what goes in the bag, and I'm just like shoving stuff in an IKEA bag and try to get down there, and I'm running down the street, running down Bleecker Street to 6th Avenue, which is going uptown because she's at Lenox Hill. And minute number 3 that I waited to catch a cab was the longest minute of my entire life. Thank you very much.
FAQ NYC is a part of The City, a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom dedicated to hard-hitting journalism that serves the people of New York. If you like what you're hearing, the best way to support our work is by setting up a monthly recurring donation at thecity.nyc/give. If you already make a monthly donation and want to add a special one-time gift, you can also do that at thecity.nyc/give. FAQ NYC also receives support from P&T Knitwear, an independent bookstore, cafe, and event space on Manhattan's Lower East Side with a podcast studio that can be freely reserved for community use. The podcast is a proud member of the Brickhouse Cooperative of independent journalists, critics, and artists, and is affiliated with the Colin Powell School at CUNY City College, where our co-host Christina Greer is one of the Moynihan Public Scholars Inaugural Fellows. Our hosts for this episode were Alex Brooklyn and Harry Siegel, who's also our executive producer. And I'm our engineer, Adam Chimera. Thank you to our storytellers, David Ray Martinez, J.T. Price, Adam Levy, and FAQ NYC and the city's own Katie Honan. And to Annie Nocenti for hosting the Thirst Storytelling Salon. And thank you, listener, for joining us and making it this far. Be kind, be cool, and we'll be back soon with more.